hilariously, and well-deservedly, Harry and Meghan have been voted some of the most disliked public figures. Once again, years in a row, nobody can take their crown. Really, their popularity started sliding downwards after the wedding, way back in 2018, but there were rumblings even before that. A lot of us, even just in the engagement interview, felt something was very off with Meghan Markle because she's always acting, she comes across as a real serious try-hard, which is suspicious. It always makes you wonder, who else comes across this way? People who you cannot trust in real life. That's who comes across that way. Swindlers, cheats, people who are abusive in relationships, manipulators, and we've unfortunately, almost all of us have come across people like that before. So it's not just bullies or mean girls in school, but people who will actually screw stuff up for you in real life or screw you over in real life and smile to your face after they did it like nothing's wrong, nothing at all. It's those types of folks who act like this and give off this contrived, try hard, fake energy is usually people like that who you learn to kind of have a red flag. And so for many people, myself included, could not watch the engagement interview without seeing some sinister signs. But the most pivotal moments in Harry and Meghan's public life history have led to their immense dislike. There are really, really big moments that turned the tides of how Harry and Meghan have been viewed. So today, let's count down the top 10 most important moments in their history that have contributed to them being most disliked year after year after year. Just why they are disliked. The biggest reasons, the most voted of this is what really did it for me type of moments that had the biggest negative responses that have contributed most to this disliked status that they now enjoy. In one of their earliest scandals that damaged their public standing a great deal, but also had severe consequence for their roles in general, at the time they were senior working royals, was when Harry had positioned himself as an environmentally conscious royal, speaking about climate change and lecturing people on climate change and reducing their carbon footprint. But then he turned around and he and the Meg had been found out by the press to have taken multiple private jet flights in just 11 days. Less than 2 weeks, they took at least 4 private jet flights. Short distances. They could have done a train ride and it would have been almost the same amount of time. And each and every time they have been sighted traveling, almost exclusively it's been private. Harry and Meghan have never been spotted on a commercial flight, I don't believe. Especially not Meghan all by herself. And I think Harry might have been spotted on a commercial flight once or twice, but mostly it's private. And this was worse for Harry and Meghan because William had been regularly spotted on commercial flights around the same time before this happened and since it's happened. William regularly flies commercial, but Harry and Meghan not so much. The timeline of this scandal was in 2019, in August, Harry and Meghan took multiple private jet flights in just a few days, including trips to Ibiza for Meghan's birthday and to visit Elton John in France. And I think they also did somebody else's wedding. So there was probably 5, maybe 6 private jet flights during this time frame. And the very following month, just a matter of weeks later, in September, Harry officially announced Travelist, a sustainable travel initiative founded in partnership with companies such as Booking.com, Skyscanner, and Visa, all about reducing your carbon footprint while traveling and traveling in an eco-friendly way. And he had been lecturing people even before September on being mindful of climate change and environmentalism and pollution and things like that and what we can do in our own lives. And he said that he and his family almost always fly commercial. And then immediately he was on all these private jets at once. And so there was naturally widespread criticism of this. This timing created a perception problem as well for the Travelist launch and is probably why Travelist never really took off. The jet stories were still dominating the headlines when Travelist was unveiled, which led critics to call the sustainability campaign hypocritical and tone-deaf and write it off as not that serious. Because if Harry's not very serious about it, then why should we be? Many commentators mark that combination, that his environmental brand launch collided with the jet scandal, as one of the earliest major hits to his credibility. And at the time, he was still a working royal, so it was a pretty big deal. It was a bit of a scandal at the time. And as I said, I think it had long-term impacts to Travelist and certainly to Harry and Meghan for their hypocrisy. They have not been able to shake the hypocrite title since. Next up, we have Megxit. Their exit from working for the royal family was announced on the 8th of January 2020, and the events that followed threw everything into chaos, but especially for Harry and Meghan's image. It not only made the couple look petty and petulant, but the way in which they did it, the way in which they announced Megxit and participated in the Sandringham Summit, tarnished their reputation as lacking professionalism forevermore. When they announced that they were stepping back and aimed to become financially independent and sought out more privacy, it generated a huge fallout with the public. Even supporters were dismayed and sort of shocked that Harry and Meghan would do this, and a lot of royal watchers were kind of relieved because Harry and Meghan were just not doing a very good job in their position. Critics argued that the tone was abrupt, which fed into narratives that they prioritized personal brand over duty, especially the fact that they did blindside the monarchy. They didn't actually clear their statement with the monarchy before they posted it. That's really rude and shitty to do to a grandparent, I just have to say. But it's no secret that Megxit was a huge moment for how people perceived the couple. At first, I think some people, though, still gave them the benefit of the doubt of like, well, maybe they really will go off and live privately. But when news broke that they signed all these deals and were courting media attention and doing interviews and lining up all this stuff, it was clear that none of this was about privacy. And it never was, and it never will be. So once again, hypocritical, but also just the character of them was revealed in the way they handled Megxit. Probably one of the most pivotal moments for public perception slipping was the entire Oprah interview, because it had so many blatant lies, but also because what they were complaining about seemed so small and silly, and that's just very unbecoming. For a grown man to be whining and crying that his daddy stopped giving him allowance is just ick. For Meghan to be whining and complaining about things that didn't even make sense, that she didn't see press, but people were calling and telling her that there was negative press, and thus it made her feel like everything was wrong and awful and never going to be okay again. Like, stop. That family wondered what the baby might look like in a positive way, I should add. That's something that every family asks. So that interview left Harry and Meghan looking extraordinarily out of touch, selfish and self-absorbed, and even toxic. This 2-hour televised interview, which I have a whole series on with clips so you can hear for yourself a really detailed breakdown. I will link the playlist here, and I'll try to remember to link it at the end of today's video, but it's also on the playlist section of my page. But the Sussexes made major revelations, and many of them were later found out to be lies, exaggerations, mischaracterizations, taken out of context, fabrications, and contradictions of other things that they have said since. But it included things like mental health struggles, conversation within the royal family about their children before they were even pregnant. But again, we had conflicts of timeline. Harry, in the Oprah interview, said that it happened before they were even engaged or before they were married. Meghan said that it happened while she was pregnant. So they didn't even have their story straight within the Oprah interview itself. And since then, Harry has completely backtracked it and tried to erase it from memory. In the UK, the reaction was overwhelmingly negative. For example, a YouGov poll found 56% of British adults said they felt none or not very much sympathy after the interview. And critics argued the interview was self-indulgent, airing private family matters publicly, damaged trust in Harry and Meghan's earlier claims of wanting privacy, and also, of course, just talking about things that happen behind closed doors within a family in a public setting is just a shitty thing to do. It shows bad character. I don't care who you are. I don't care how big you think the stakes are. That's not right. Within a family unit, there is an unwritten rule of privacy and having each other's backs, at least with privacy, and not airing it out. I won't even talk to extended family members about private conversations I've had with individual family members unless everybody approves it ahead of time. I won't do it. Like, if you come from a gossipy family, you'll understand this perfectly, just how shitty it can feel to find out that your family played telephone, passing along a private conversation or something you told just one person in your family. Now everybody knows. It's not a nice feeling. And so think about that on a bigger scale, that you tell someone something in private, or you have a private argument or conversation or disagreement or anything, and then suddenly it's made public. Oh, that is so wrong on every level. So of course, the Oprah interview was hugely damaging to Harry and Meghan's likability, but also their long-term reputations are hugely damaged by it. And that Oprah interview is so fascinating to look back on. I know it's hard to find, but I even sometimes think I should look back on it with you guys and reiterate so much of it was a lie, because I know so many people can't find it now to see it, and I have it recorded. So maybe I'll do that if you guys ask. But let's move on to number 4. In one of their most long-running scandals that has been doing damage to their reputation since early 2017 is the bullying accusations. Meghan especially, but Meghan and Harry in general, being rude to staff and unkind bosses. This one I'd like to take a moment to point out the misconceptions here. Harry and Meghan try to push out into the media positive spins on them as employers or partners, that working with them is positive, and they are down to earth and thoughtful and all these positive adjectives that they want associated with themselves. And it is an attempt to trick people into not believing the accounts to the contrary. But it is essential to think of a few things here. First off, we're talking about nearly 10 years' time, from 2017 till now, across multiple different countries, continents even. This is a pattern. If it really was all this like culture shock and all these things, so much just the people in the monarchy and at the time the Cambridges just trying to foil all of the Sussex plans, then these rumors and these reports from employees would not have followed them to America, but they have. So something that is many, many years and many, many different locations and even different types of projects, having consistently bad experiences with employees working with you, then you're the problem, Meghan. But it's also important to think to maybe a mean boss from your past. They're not usually nightmares 100% of the time, right out of the gate, from before you even accept the job onwards. Like, no. These are usually things that are either like a change over time where it slowly devolves into sheer and utter chaos, or an unpredictable, which boss do I get today, the mean one or the nice one sort of a thing, where it's very hot and cold and it's a roller coaster. It's almost never obviously untenable for the get-go or abusive dynamic in the first place. It's something that happens over time. And it's also oftentimes something that can initially be subtle and involve other people and be manipulative. Like, think flying monkeys and stuff like that. Like, it can be very complex situation. What matters is this pattern. And when we look at it, it's one of their most consistent and most long-standing that they simply cannot shake. They have lost staff ever since Meg entered the picture, and it's never stopped. They are still losing staff regularly and still having people come out to say, sometimes anonymously, but sometimes on the record, that it was not a good experience. Within palace circles and in media reports, there were internal emails with complaints alleging that Meghan had mistreated royal staff. For example, one former communications director said that Meghan was able to bully 2 PAs, personal assistants, out of their jobs. While the palace did not publicly release any full investigation report, these claims fed into a broader perception of Meghan as difficult, which damaged popular sympathy. And to make matters worse, there was the Hollywood Reporter expose just last year, and continuing rumors of similar vibe, that Meghan is really hard to work with, that she's a terror, that she's a dictator. And I would imagine that there is a lot of that hot and cold going on in good cop, bad cop type situations. But I also think that Meghan gets a lot of the heat for it because she might be a little bit more directly aggressive with people face to face than Harry. But I would imagine Harry's a little bit more cowardly about it, but still causing trouble. Like telling someone to their face, oh, okay. And then behind their backs, like, dude, this person sucks. Because there's rumors that Harry was like that. He would be nice to journalists to their face and then go back over to a different table in a restaurant or a pub and make fun of that reporter who he was just talking to. And that's just shows really, is a really mean person type of thing to do. But it's not just working for Meghan and Harry that sucks. It's also just their ability to do work itself that has damaged their public perception. Their work ethic and quality of the output of the things that they have done is lacking. And they have not produced things that make people think, oh, give them a little break. You know, they're really good at this. They're really good at that. They've done this right. They've done that right. No, they don't even have that going for them. After their royal exit, they signed all these major deals, like with Spotify and Netflix and book deals, and they launched projects under their foundation, Archewell. And then we watched as archetypes fell apart and the Spotify deal went up in flames and had a very dramatic end. The U.S. authorities flagged Archewell as delinquent briefly for missed paperwork, which shows just a complete and utter lack of attention to detail and adequate management. I mean, those are some baseline tasks that should never happen, those types of mistakes. And critics argued that the brand of Archewell and just Harry and Meghan in general as a brand promised big change but didn't deliver at scale, which hurt their credibility. They also did a lot of things to undermine Archewell, like all their attempts at commercial endeavors, engaging in things that were just for show and not actually doing much with what they had. And it seemed like Harry and Meghan were a lot more focused on their public narrative versus developing a brand for, you know, becoming financially independent, like they have said, but also for Archewell and for their charitable work. Their philanthropic work has been minuscule in comparison to some other charities of similar size. They just haven't delivered much. And by under-delivering consistently, it shows something about their character. And it frustrates the public to watch people who can't accomplish things continue to get opportunities. So that has also resulted in people not liking Harry and Meghan, in part because they seem to be talentless and weaseling their way into opportunities regardless, which is frustrating to watch, especially when people struggle. And it doesn't help that their projects like The Bench and Spare and the Netflix series are cringy and unbecoming to them and were poorly received. That didn't help anything either. We even had the really, really cringy, really, really awful quotes from Spare about like visualizing Diana in the room while he rubbed her lip cream on his nether regions. Like, these types of things give people the ick, and it doesn't go away. So here we have established halfway through this list that Harry and Meghan are hypocritical, selfish, liars, mean, and lack all manner of work ethic or credibility in any department. And we're only halfway through the list. This next one made me personally quite offended. I was pretty irritated with Meghan for this, but when the Uvalde school tragedy happened, Meghan went and visited the memorial, like the very next day or something like that, in Texas in May 2022. And she insisted that the visit was personal, yet it coincided with filming and media announcements and generated uproar that it was a photo op. She had camera people in tow. She had all these security guards that made people stand back from the memorial when she went to put flowers down. And she publicized it. Whether that's fair or not that people criticized her for it is debatable, I suppose. But I sure do think it was a big mistake and not right. Moments like this reinforce perception of opportunistic activism or symbolic activism rather than organic support. A similar reaction happened when the California wildfires happened last year or earlier this year. It was fake statesmanship. It was uninvited. It was unwelcome. It was self-important. It was attention-grabbing. They called the press and let them know. They were cosplaying faux royals in America, and that is a ticket to being hated. But it's also just the sheer audacity and questionable character of somebody going around to sites of tragedy, uninvited, doing nothing but getting press for yourself. It's disgusting. And I absolutely hated that type of behavior from them. I find it deplorable in every way, shape, and form. It was gross. It is gross. It still is. And they need to seriously knock it off if they want to salvage their reputations. But also, just like in general, their motives were obviously to try to appear a certain way. And that is the only reason why they showed up to those places. And it backfired. And it made them more disliked than ever before, for obvious reasons. Next, we have Harry's memoir spare in general, but also this persistent us versus them, the royals versus the Sussexes, framing that Harry and Meghan continue to push out onto the public. Every interview from Harry and Meghan somehow touches on them positioning themselves against the royal family, even in a sort of sideways, indirect manner. Harry's memoir, if you could call it that, Harry's fictitious memoir, published January 2023, made several unflattering revelations about his family, including previously undisclosed details and criticisms that happened behind closed doors in privacy, as well as some questionable stuff about himself and his view of things, the way he spoke about certain journalists or even a teacher in a disparaging manner also didn't endear him to anyone. And many people in the UK and across the world saw it as airing your dirty laundry, and it further alienated monarchy-supporting public as well as people who just think that that's not a good thing to do. People felt Harry was breaking a family code, just a general code of decency, that things that happen between family members are not for public consumption. As I said before, it's just generally a really shitty thing to do to anybody, but especially a family member and family members who are also in the public eye is extra manipulative and crappy for Harry and Meghan to do that so often, repeatedly. And remember, all these projects where they were doing this, where they were airing their dirty laundry and trying to say negative things about their family members, the royal family, this was during a time where Prince Philip passed away and then Queen Elizabeth passed away. They were still releasing all these projects during this window of time when the family was grieving and going through massive season of change. Because when Queen Elizabeth passed, everybody's lives changed in so many ways because of the line of succession changing and King Charles ascending. So these are times where your family needs compassion and grace and space and support. And Harry and Meghan not only didn't do that, but did the opposite and tried to continue to attack. It was just gross and it was crazy. And like I've said before, it's essential to think about what this type of behavior means for someone's character. It's insightful. It shows you what they're willing to do to be seen as right, or what they're willing to do to convince themselves that they are right, to justify their actions, or how the lengths they're willing to go to be vindictive and inflict pain or harm on someone else. The type of person to do these things with zero compassion for repercussions is just plain and simple not a good person. And so the public rejected this, and Harry and Meghan have not been able to distance themselves from this reputation of being mean and callous and disregarding everyone else's privacy and right to live peacefully and privately. Like, they don't care about anybody else's privacy, and that's evidenced by the fact that they're willing to talk about private moments that involve other people anytime they want. It just matters if they want to talk about it or not. It doesn't matter whose privacy is being violated. So naturally, it damaged their reputation. Which leads us to number 8 on the list. There's nothing quite like being caught lying repeatedly to damage your public image, credibility, but most of all, likability. No one likes a liar. They're slippery snake of a human being. Especially people who can't keep any stories straight at all. They rapidly become pariahs in all areas and impossible to like, really. Because if you like somebody, you want to be able to defend them, and you can't really defend people like Harry and Meghan. Their inconsistencies and contradictions in public statements have done them no favors in the likability game. Let's go back way to the beginning. This pattern is so long-standing. In 2016, Harry issued a statement saying Meghan was subject to abuse from the press, and there was absolutely no evidence to support this claim. That statement was quietly removed from the royal website in 2023, which raised eyebrows, but they said, we're just tidying up. There's certain things that aren't relevant anymore. Harry and Meghan don't work for us anymore. How is this relevant? But also, like, duh. They didn't want that statement on their website in the first place. Also, their claims in Netflix and Oprah and Spare, all of these things have been questioned for being unspecific or actually inaccurate or taken out of context or just inappropriate things to share, which many felt damaged Harry and Meghan's trustworthiness. Coming in at number 9 is the very fact that Harry and Meghan are still being labeled as royalty adjacent and pursuing commercial deals while using their titles. People don't care for that. After stepping away from the monarchy, Harry and Meghan continued to be described as royals turned brand or in the royal section of the tabloids, and some of the public backlash stems from a perception that they wanted the privileges of royalty, like the access, the headline visibility, the opportunities, without the responsibilities, like public service and protocol. And then they're monetizing their platforms. And so the fact that they're using their title every time they're anywhere and doing anything, and it includes their commercial endeavors, really rubs people the wrong way. It feels icky because it is. They were told not to do this, and yet they do. But furthermore, it goes back to the whole point of a title, what that means, and how one should behave if they are titled. We recently put out a video talking about this in connection to the Andrew situation and how that may or may not affect Harry and Meghan and why a lot of people think it should. So I will try to link that video for you at the top of the page or in the description box for today's video if you'd like to go back and take a look at that. But it's also a situation where, like, Harry and Meghan could choose not to use those titles every time they do something. They could choose not to. And they complained so much about the monarchy and they complained so much about all these things that then it would make more sense to not use it. So it feels hypocritical and self-serving once again. They want to have their cake and eat it too. And that's just not how it works. So people are automatically turned off either by principle or by virtue of it being confusing. Like, either they think, well, you shouldn't be using the titles because that's what Queen Elizabeth said, no titles for commercial profits and things of that nature. You can't monetize your title, you can't monetize the monarchy. And doing so gives the wrong impression that the monarchy somehow supports whatever it is that you're doing when they don't. So you shouldn't on principle. And other people think that it's confusing and hypocritical. Like, either you hate everything the monarchy stands for, like you said in Oprah and Netflix, and it was so horrible, then why would you want that? And all you say is negative things. This is another thing that I think has made Harry and Meghan unlikable. Bonus round here, that they have never said anything positive about the monarchy. They've never said anything positive about it, or the outreach that they do, or the amount of charitable initiatives they fund, or good things that they do. They don't point that out ever. They don't even point out positives about their experience, that they got to travel to beautiful places, that they got to meet wonderful people, that they did have a lot of support. Even just that they had amazing opportunities while they were part of the royal family. They have never acknowledged not one positive thing about their time with the royal family or about the royal family in general. Not once have Harry and Meghan made a public positive comment. That's insane. Because just on odds, it was not 100% bad. What about your wedding? What about your beautiful dress, your beautiful flowers, your beautiful reception? What about your home, Frogmore Cottage, that you got to renovate for $4 million? What about any of it? What about getting to travel to Fiji and Australia and other places? Like, there had to have been something positive. And never. The $1 million clothing budget, Meghan, that's not a positive. You didn't have anything positive to say. That's not only unbelievable, but it's extraordinarily unlikable for somebody to just be like, nope, 100% bad, 100% awful. That's just somebody being petty. But let's move on to number 10. Harry and Meghan have alienated themselves from key audiences, like the media, certain journalists they have it out for and are petty with, like, no, they can't come to this event. Business partners, potential business partners, and just the general public, including the UK and everywhere, because Harry and Meghan's addiction to self-promotion. It's not very becoming, and it's not very likable for somebody to constantly be so entitled to push themselves out onto the public constantly. The amount, the sheer volume of interviews, podcasts, projects, just tidbits leaked out into the press that Harry and Meghan do is insane. It's almost incalculable how much they push themselves out and promote themselves, no matter how disliked they are. We have never had a break from them. They put themselves in the media more than most normal celebrity and famous people. They put themselves into the media more than the Kardashians. Maybe not social media-wise. Like the Kardashians probably post to social media more. But the Kardashians probably do fewer media outreach and interviews and leaking details and opinions to the press. They probably do fewer of that than Harry and Meghan. And that's the Kardashians, like the epitome of self-promotion. Harry and Meghan seem to do more than them. And Harry and Meghan aren't even liked. They don't even have a fan base, really. And so it's just gross and also hypocritical from a couple who demanded privacy and whines about privacy and whines about social media and internet harms and safety and stuff like that while actively using social media and pushing themselves out there. So cumulatively, these events have led to a situation where many in the UK public and across the world say that they have little sympathy for the public. For example, after the Oprah interview, only a minority felt that the interview was appropriate to do in the first place. Moreover, reports of business and celebrity partners staying clear contribute to the notion that the couple find fewer opportunities due to the brand risk. And there's so many examples of this. Of course, all that we have already mentioned, but even things like the South Africa I'm not okay thing. That type of nonsense are some of the most impactful examples of this because it's straight out of Harry and or Meghan's mouths. And they alienate the audience by virtue of their personality and poor judgment in these moments. And the general untrustworthiness of the couple has to be on this list as well, of just the inconsistencies, the lies, the contradictions. Even just like the Bloomberg interview, the Fortune Summit interview. Meghan will contradict herself within a given interview and across looking back at past statements, and same goes for Harry. There's almost never a clear connection and being rooted in reality, a clear connection to the truth. It's almost never present with Harry and Meghan, and it's impossible to like somebody like that. There's more reasons, of course, for their massive dislike that they are now enjoying. There's a lot of reasons why people don't like Harry and Meghan, but this is my list of the top 10. Not only are they proud hypocrites, selfish bullies, lazy, self-serving liars, but they're also known to use tragedies to try to advance their image, which is repulsive. They are fixated on small problems, repeatedly bringing them up in an attempt to justify their choices and actions, which are clearly wrong, a trait no one really likes. How is it likable to constantly repeat old stories and act like they're big deals? Stuff like that makes sense to the world of like, what? What are you doing? Like losing the perks when you quit your job? Why are you complaining about that? Like losing your allowance in your 30s? Why are you complaining out loud about that? What is wrong with you? Let it go. Be still with your choices. Move forward. Stop looking back and blaming. But they always try to pit themselves against very popular royals, and it backfires. They also try to pit themselves against just the public at large, the entirety of the UK. Remember, that was the initial narrative. The UK just hates Meghan. Okay. No. Meghan betrayed the privileges she was given, and people didn't like that. There's a big difference. All this just makes Harry and Meghan look like whiny, illogical bullies, because their reputation also includes plethora of examples over exaggerating complaints, trying to play victim, making things seem way worse than they were. And as I've said before, there is a time and place to speak on personal struggles or things that nature, sure, of course, but it should never become your identity and the only thing you talk about every single time you do anything or go anywhere. That's just not healthy. But it's also not likable because everybody has struggles in life, things that didn't go how they wanted. And to make it your identity and elevate disappointments to some of the most important things about who you are is just a negative way to be. And it's a negative outlook to constantly fixate on these things. That's what Harry and Meghan do and what they have done. Therefore, their image is negative. Almost every time you hear a Harry and Meghan, there's a negative tone or complaint or something about it is negative. Something within the content is negative, even if it's just pointing out a problem. They rarely push themselves into the positive spin of things, the optimism. But that's what really people like. People want to hear, even if they hear something negative first, they want to hear a positive outlook at the end. That they want to be reassured that there is hope, that things will be okay, that you still have a positive spin to add on at the end. And Harry and Meghan never do. It's always just negative. The whole thing entirely, the whole vibe is negative. And so they've curated this malcontent image for themselves through the years across many pivotal, important moments. But most recently, we've seen Meghan try to play the celebrity field, elbow her way into things, invite herself to high-profile events. And then with that opportunity, just like with the royal family opportunity, she fails to behave. She fails to act normally, look graceful and effortless, or be gracious about it. She fails to be magnanimous or generous or genuine. And it's always a show. The quality of work or product or output, I suppose we could say, is objective to an extent. Even things like the lack of style sense or looking poised, one could argue, is less important than substance, but it still matters. And ultimately, Harry and Meghan have no substance behind anything. So then you're left being like, this looks like a mess, it sounds like a mess, and it's negative, and there's no substance here. So of course they're disliked. So for this list, we aimed for the maximum damage to public image. Exactly what ruined Harry and Meghan's image and reputation. But what do you think should have made it onto this list that is a really impactful moment that did big damage to their public image that I did not put on the list? Leave it in the comments. Thank you for joining me for today's video. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a happy day ahead. I'll see you next time. Bye!